This parable we've heard this morning, I'm sure for many of us, is well known to us, and its immediate message, I think, is very obvious. If we're given talents, then we should use them and not waste them. And I think it's natural for all of us to consider the various talents that we may have. We're drawn naturally to want to express them and to develop them. The talents of each of us, of course, will vary from person to person. But it's natural for us to enjoy using our talents, especially when they are for the good of others. Parents, for example, will identify the particular interests and talents of their children and ensure that they are able to be developed. This brings a sense of achievement and satisfaction for the children and advances their potential contribution to life. So at the natural level, this parable makes clear and obvious sense. However, we are aware of the fact that the parable begins with the words, "The kingdom of heaven is like." With these words, the Lord invites us to consider the use of talents in the spiritual arena. This may be a little bit more difficult to navigate. While it's relatively easy for us to recognise, identify our physical talents and how we can contribute to human society, the parable today asks us to identify those talents which can contribute in the spiritual sphere. Now, one person who has developed an awareness of the use of talents in the spiritual sphere is St. Paul. In fact, in a number of occasions, he provides a list of various gifts that can be used for the upbuilding of the Christian community. So in his letter to the Corinthians, he actually provides a list of specifically spiritual gifts that are the product of a person living under the influence of the Holy Spirit. It's evident that these gifts would have been witnessed by him among the Christian community in Corinth. Thus he identifies various spiritual gifts, often known as charismata, that individuals clearly possessed in the Corinthian community. So in 1 Corinthians 12, he lists them as preaching with wisdom, preaching instruction, faith, healing, power of miracles, prophecy, recognizing spirits, tongues, and the interpretation of tongues. These are often referred to as the charismatic gifts. Now, while some of them may seem to us today to be rather esoteric, St. Paul identified them as works of the Holy Spirit in the lives of members of the community in Corinth. In his letter to the Romans, he provides a list that speaks more about gifts that are being exercised for the benefit of the community. So he lists them as prophecy, administration, teaching, preaching, almsgiving, leadership, and works of mercy. And further in his letter to the Ephesians, he speaks more about, if you like, roles that are being carried out within the Christian community. And these he identifies as apostle, prophet, evangelist, pastor, and teacher. So Paul was very aware that there was in fact a multiplicity of gifts that were given to individual Christians. And he taught that these gifts should be not simply seen as, if you like, personal blessings, but they really should be understood to be at the service of the Christian community. And to highlight this, he use the image of the Christian community as being like a human body. In the human body, there are very many different and quite distinct organs and parts, and all have their unique role to play to enable the body to function. So St. Paul argues that there are very different gifts given to individual Christians that can serve the effective functioning of the Christian community. So this can cause us to ponder how we are meant to contribute to the life and mission of the Christian community to which we belong, which in effect is our local parish. So it reminds us that we should not just consider ourselves as passive recipients of the services offered to us through the parish, but how we can be in fact active contributors to its life and mission. You may be aware that the Church has just completed a 1-month-long synod in Rome, and the participants were asked to consider the life of and mission of the Church under 3 headings: communion, participation, and mission. And a synthesis document, which has now been released as a preparation for the second round of the Synod in October 2024, outlines the outcome of these reflections. Actually, these 3 categories, communion, participation, and mission, can be useful for us in considering our own engagement in our Catholic life. Through baptism, we come into communion with God, and also with communion with the body of believers, the Church. I mean, we all can sense, can't we, a certain natural communion with all those who are our fellow Catholics. We just don't need to know our fellow Catholics personally to have a sense of a bond with them, a communion with them. It's because, as St. Paul says, there is one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and who is Father of us all. So we are, in our union with God, effectively brought into communion with one another as Catholics. On this basis of communion then, we are then led into our participation in the life of the Church. Of course, the apex of this participation is a celebration of the Holy Eucharist. However, our participation is also meant to be made concrete, because we are parts of a local Christian community, the parish. Here we're reminded that we really should be active participants, contributing in one way or another to the life and mission of the parish to which we belong. The third element is that of mission. We are conscious that Christ expects us to have a missionary outlook, willing to turn our faith into action. And the multiple works of the Church give testimony to this. We know also that one of the most important aspect of the mission of the Church is to witness to the faith and help others to come to know and love God. In this third dimension, we are to engage as people of faith in the world around us. Thus, through our communion, we belong. Through our participation, we contribute. And through our mission, we advance the work of Christ in the world. This is a very simple but a very useful way, I believe, of understanding who we are as Catholics. The Gospel today, the parable we just listened to, speaks in very clear terms that the Lord expects us to utilise the gifts that we've been given. They're not to be left dormant, buried in the ground. And this applies in a very special way to our participation in the life of the church. So perhaps during the Mass this morning, in a quiet moment, we can reflect on the particular gifts we have that can contribute at the realm of the Spirit. We can consider to how we have been using the gifts that we've been given, and whether there is more that we can and should be doing.